But let's talk a little bit about, I'm a really big fan of mediation. Do you know what that is?
Well, that's what I used.
You did that.
Yeah, mediation. There was no lawyers involved. I don't, first of all, I'm not gonna, we didn't want lawyers involved because, I mean, the more you duke it out and you duel each other, then the more money they make. And I don't know, I mean, I'm not speaking about all lawyers, but I just felt like we didn't really need for them to get involved in our life. I felt like, okay, we had this child together, we were married for this, amount of time, whatever, and we should be able to figure this out in some kind of amicable,
yeah, in an amicable way, right?
Amicable way, or so, not so much of like letting somebody walk, her walk all over me or me, but we had to come to some kind of agreement.
Absolutely.
And that really was the most important thing. And I mean, I'm not saying it ended smoothly either.
Right.
But ultimately, we had to come to some kind of agreement with each other and do it in a way. And lawyers would not. It wasn't going to be smooth.
Lawyers would not help that process.
Absolutely not.
So that's interesting because we both did not deal with lawyers in our separations, and we both have good relationships with our exes. Now I wonder if there's actually a connection between those two things. And I'm going to say yes, that there is a connection between that. And again, I get not to disparage divorce lawyers across the board. Obviously there's a need for that and so forth, but let's talk on a personal level from the point of view of two parents who need to split apart. You don't need to take it to court. And going to court they will speak a lot about the best interests of the child. But let me tell you something, very little of what goes on in family court is in the best interest of the child. It's a very complicated and archaic.
Did we just say that?
Yes.
It is very archaic.
It's an archaic system.
It's kind of
in this book that I'm going to promote by Alec Baldwin, he makes an interesting statement by saying that the court system as it stands right now for family court is based on the percentage of marriages that ended in absolute mayhem, where you have an abusive situation, typically coming from the man, right? You have deadbeat fathers who don't see their children and don't pay any child support, that kind of thing. So we all know that exists out there, right? But the whole court system is skewed for those kind of situations. The court system is not
the worst case scenario.
It is not designed for fathers like you who say, well, I want to split the time. I want to have as much time with her as you have with her.
Yeah, they don't get it. There's a look of confusion.
Right, as though, again, talk about archaic systems, as though fathers are not capable of being parents. As though fathers only go to work and only have, weekends to spend with their child. Do you know what the normal, the sort of the custody balance is, like the typical custody balance, at least in New Jersey is?
I don't know.
It's every other Wednesday, every other weekend, and either every Wednesday and every other weekend, or every other Wednesday and every other weekend, something like that. It's a very little amount of time.
Yeah, of course.
Can you imagine every other weekend is all you get?
Yeah, no,
That's not parenting.
No, it's not.
That's not providing a relationship with your child. So, I'm not going to get into a whole critique of the way family court laws work, but when you go into a separation and a custody battle through the courtroom, it's just going to be very different. And as a father, I'm going to say right now, it will not have your best interests at heart, and certainly will not have the best interests of your child at heart, knowing that a child needs to have time with both parents. That's what parenting is.
Exactly. Even if that parent calls and leaves a voicemail about, you little brat. I don't know. Do you know what I'm talking about?
He's referring to the Alec Baldwin. Let's cut to the Alec Baldwin thing for a second, because I want to talk about his book.
Okay.
We were just saying that we probably need to do this in 2 parts, because it is pretty...
It's an in-depth topic.
All right, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I think this is a fabulous book, and I really recommend it to any father mom should read it too, but any dad who's going through a split right now, it's a really, really helpful book. Alec Baldwin will talk about, essentially echoing what I just said about how the injustice of the family court laws, like how they're set up and don't really favor the child, really favor the mother, et cetera, et cetera. And he also gives a lot of good tips on how to choose an attorney, how to decide if you really should go in the direction of court and not through mediation. He's a big fan of private mediation, just like I am. And he'll talk a lot about your different options and how to make decisions that will be, that will work the best for you and for everyone. He also makes a really good case of how the contentiousness of a split really rips apart a child, and how absolutely devastating that can be for the child. Now, you wanted to say something about that phone call.
Well, in Alec's defense, a while back there was a phone call that was leaked, a voicemail that Alec Baldwin left. Private voicemail.
That was absolutely that should never have been made public. But people don't care. It's so interesting. Yeah. The public doesn't care about that. They're not going to say ooh, who's the person who did that? They don't care. Act. Right.
But let me say,
it's more about did you hear what he said to his daughter? That's where the emphasis comes in. But
and in his defense, obviously what he said wasn't very nice. I've never spoken to my daughter like that. That's not the point, though. The point is, that was private. We don't know what happened before that. Exactly. We don't know what was going through his head, how angry he was. The point is, that was a private thing that was not meant to be shared with the world. And if you think it was okay or wasn't okay, just imagine anything that you've ever done that you wish you didn't do or hadn't done, right? Made public. Right. And there's something in everybody's
Everybody
closet.
Has something like that, right?
The fact that it was Alec Baldwin, who's famous, and that's why that became worse than it really was. Like I said, I'm not justifying it,
right.
But that can be overlooked. My goodness, if you're watching this right now and you have an ex-partner, I'm sure you've said things to them that you would never want repeated again, especially in public,
Well, that's the thing. But to add to that point, it's not just about speaking to the partner. It's the whole issue is saying that to a young girl and how devastating that can be.
Yeah.
But when I heard that, what I heard was the anguish in his voice and the frustration.
Yeah, he was pissed.
He was pissed, and that's directed at the entire situation, which means his everything that he went through in the courtrooms and the ex and the frustration of a young girl who's not a little child. She has her own cell phone and she knows not to turn it off for 2 weeks straight while her dad has been trying to reach her. And most people don't know the subtext of what was going on, obviously, or the background and what led up to that, because he wasn't given the courtesy to, to be able to explain what led up to that horrible phone call. But certainly, if you read this book, you get a much clearer sense of how absolutely painful and frustrating that situation was. What I love about this book is that he really speaks to the fathers, and I really feel like you should.
I should.
Dads get a really bad rap in the arena of custody. They just do. It's 2009. Why can't people understand that fathers have and want to have an equal role? And and he quotes this he quotes a doctor or a study. There are many studies that say that joint custody is actually the healthiest thing you can do for a child. And joint custody has, many different parameters to it, but for the most part, joint custody means that you're splitting the time with your child. So.